some of those triangles are like black hole vacuums. Like you're like, oh no,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
no, 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 no. You feel the suck.
Sneaky little fuckers as well. They pop out of nowhere. Like, what the hell did you come from? Like,
Oh, fell in a
Yeah.
hole.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
How to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, come and join the conversation in our Facebook group.
And enjoy the show.
hello, hello, hello.
Hey everyone.
So I'm really excited. Something very exciting is happening next week. Which actually reminds me, I need to ask you something about that when we're not recording a podcast episode. But it would be helpful for those listening to share why I'm excited. So what happens a week today?
I'm going back to Key West for Pride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get to hang out in the same space for a week, which I can't believe it's been like a year since we've actually seen each other in person because
Right?
we're
Like
in such
legit,
close contact all the time.
like a
It doesn't-
legit year.
Yeah, an actual year, which is just that, like, it hurts my heart a little bit to like acknowledge that. I'm like, oh. But this is exciting that we actually get to hang out, and we have fun planned. Also, we're not just going to be doing work stuff. So yeah, exciting times. We want to talk today about anything else you want to say about that before I like move swiftly on.
No, just
No.
good times are about to happen.
Yes.
Got my good times
does-
dance going.
It does make it very, very busy trying to get everything done so that when Serena's here, we can just have the good time dances. But it's good. It's good. Like, I'm really looking forward to it. So today we're going to talk about a brand new shape. Today we are going to talk about something that we have not shared anywhere else with anyone else. This is brand new content today. And before we get into that, there was a conversation that Serena and I just had that adds a little something to the drama triangle and empowerment ecosystems conversations that we've been having over the last several weeks. And we just wanted to make sure that we put this in so that there is no confusion over it. And that is like, what if you are kind of feeling like, well, I'm not really in any of I can't see that I'm like actively in any of the approaches of the drama triangle right this second. So does that mean I am automatically in the empowerment ecosystem? No, that's not how that works.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? Just
wouldn't it be?
I'm gonna stop and here I am.
Well, and in a lot of ways, it's kind of how, if you think about it, it works very much the way that needs meeting works. It works the way a lot of other things work in life, which is that you don't get what you want by not doing what you don't want. Like, you have to do what you want. Like, you have to actually take action. And like the empowerment ecosystem is it's a system of behaving which you have to be intentional and be putting effort into being in the empowerment ecosystem in order to be there. Now, that doesn't mean to say, like, it doesn't mean to say, God, this is hard work to be in the empowerment ecosystem. Like, once you get used to it, it actually becomes second nature and it doesn't really feel that effortful. But it is something that you are intentionally doing. I think the intentionality is the most important aspect of it. And so, like, if you're you don't get to be in the empowerment ecosystem by going, well, I'm not doing any of the drama shit. Like, that's it, right? No, we have to actually intend to do the things that are empowered.
It's an active role that you have to play. Like, there is an action involved in the empowerment ecosystem. And no, come back, thought.
Active role.
Come back to my head. Oh, shit. This is what happened when we have like an entire episode of like talking about the episodes before the episodes.
Yeah, we've just been talking for the last hour about the episodes we're about to record. So there's a lot of thoughts bubbling around in both of our heads right now.
Oh, I feel like it was good too.
like you were saying about it's like an active role. I said about you don't get to be in it just by not doing the thing. You have to intend to be in there.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
As Claire said, it's once you start doing this, like Claire and I generally like live our lives from the empowerment ecosystem. We're human, so every so often we're like, oh, fuck, where did that red triangle come
yes.
from?
And we're all surrounded by it all the time. So it's very easy. Like it's very easy to be influenced by that.
And some of those triangles are like black hole vacuums. Like you're like, oh, no. You feel the suck.
Sneaky little fuckers as well. They pop out of nowhere. Like, what the hell did you come from? Like,
fell in a hole. So yes. It doesn't take much effort once you condition, like you start making it part of your practice to actively be in the empowerment ecosystem. There is a mindfulness though. And that mindfulness becomes just a general mindfulness of being in the empowerment ecosystem, being in one of those roles. And the mindfulness also helps you see the drama triangle as bright as everywhere. Like everywhere. You're like, oh, I know how I'm dealing. Like
I see you.
I mean, it really is. And I mean, I know there's probably a lot of things that we say and people like hear it initially and they're like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Hey,
like,
you were one of them at one point.
Oh yeah, totally was. It was like
you were saying the things and Serena's like, yeah, okay, whatever.
You're going to see these dynamics everywhere. I'm like, yeah.
Sure I am.
40-something years I've never seen these dynamics, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, they've been there all along. like you said, sneaky little fuckers, where'd you come from?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you were kind of mid-sentence like saying about like once you kind of get conditioned into doing it, like
the
mindfulness it becomes very natural.
Yeah, and it's just a general mindfulness, like a mindfulness of being self first, a mindfulness of not doing harm to others. Like it becomes a second nature as that to just operate from that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like for me, it reminds me a little bit of like changing gears in a car. Like when you first start learning to change gears in a manual car, like if you've done it, I know it's funny because like almost like the vast majority of people in the UK learn to drive stick shift. Like that's what we learn. So I find it very interesting that there's so many people over here who've never learned that. They've only driven an automatic their whole lives. So it's like, I'm like when it's depicted in like TV and movies, I'm like, how do you not know how to do that? Not like from a judgmental place, but just because like that's like part of the course where
standard.
We are.
Yeah, I just learned how to do it. I mean, a couple of months ago. Like
that's wild to me. Like that was like part of like
that was just a drift. Like I don't know how to drive on this street, but I can pull into a parallel parking space drifting into it now. But like, yeah,
that wasn't like, on my driving test. I don't believe.
I was the cusp. My mom. I originally had a manual car, but never really learned on it. I think I was my generation was the cusp of the transition over. Because I do remember them being the standard.
Right.
The standard being the standard.
Right. So like when you first start to learn to do it, you have to be like, it takes a lot of energy and focus to be like, okay, you need to go on the gas, on the clutch, change the gear, off the clutch, on the gas. Like it really is. I mean, we would say the accelerator, not the gas, but hey.
There's a I think we've talked about Punky Brewster before. You never actually watched. I know you know who.
I never saw Punky Brewster, but I know because of your costume at one of my events.
There's an episode, and I'll try and find a clip. I'll try and find a clip and throw it into the show notes because it perfectly describes what Claire is saying. And it was back in the day, they were learning how to drive, and it was a standard car, and it was like they had a can of beans and then like a can of something, and so it was like, all right, now pump the beans and now press the corn, and it was just that perfect example of like,
yes,
like
and
how mindful.
It takes a lot of energy to do that. Now, and obviously bear in mind, like when you're driving a car, like, and you're driving a stick shift car, you're changing gears all the time, like you have to go in first gear to get yourself going, and then you have to get in second, and then once you're going, you're up to third or fourth, and then when you like come down on it, okay, we're coming to a junction, slow down, you're back into second, or now you're into first, and then you start the whole thing again. I mean, I can understand why people want to just drive an automatic. Quite frankly, it's exhausting, and having driven a lot of automatics now, I'm not really sure I'm bothered about a stick shift anymore, especially having had to do one on the opposite side of the car, because I had a friend who had a manual car here that I drove, and I'm like, I'm used to the stick being on my left and the stick is now on my right. This is a whole new thing for me. Anyway, but the good thing is, when you learn to drive a car, the more you do it, the easier it becomes and the more natural it becomes. And the thing about it is, like, and it's interesting because I've seen some people driving manual shift cars over this side of the pond who clearly haven't been taught to do it very well or at all, or have just figured it out themselves. Like, I know somebody who has figured it out themselves, and I'm like, it shows that you figured it out yourself, because there's a sound that the engine makes that's your clue that you need to shift. Like where you're like, the revs are up too high and the engine is straining a little bit. You're now at a point where I'm like, okay, that's the clue to shift the car. So the thing about it is, while you might get to the point where you're not thinking off the gas, on the clutch, change the gear, off the clutch, on the gas anymore, you're still mindful about it because you're still always listening for that sound in the engine that tells you that you have to shift gear. You are still actively shifting gear all the time that you're driving. It just takes less effort, and you're just so used to doing it that the sequence becomes like completely natural. It's muscle memory, and it's the reason that doing it on using a different arm, I had to start thinking again quite a bit, because I was like, oh, I need to think about, and the positions were the same, but the arm was different. So it was a very odd experience for me. But again, like, once I got used to it again, it became second nature. But I'm still listening for that thing in the car that's like, here's my clue to change. Here's my clue to change. Here's my cue to change. Cue. Yeah, here's my cue or clue. It works either way. Here's my cue to change. But that's what the intentionality is. And it's like that with the empowerment ecosystem. Even when you're not having to put all this focus, attention, and effort into doing it, you're still mindful of it. But it's like a background mindfulness. It's not something that is dominating your thoughts or your awareness or your attention at any point in time.
Agreed.
So now that we've done that little moment on the other shapes, we get to the new one. And I'm so excited to share this, because there has been something that has been missing from these shapes from the very first moment I learned about the drama triangle. Like, before I even started teaching, there's something about this. And I realized that the more I talked about the drama triangle, and the more I talked to others who knew about the drama triangle, the reason that we needed a new shape was because there was this blurring of the lines that was confusing people when it came to understanding what the shapes are about. Now, the benefit of the drama triangle is it helps us to identify the behaviors behind each of the approaches. And in doing so, it can help us to spot these in ourselves. It can help us to understand, where is this coming from? Why are we doing it? And therefore, how do we go about shifting it? So it's a really, really helpful shape. If it wasn't, we probably wouldn't have mentioned it, being honest. So like, it's a handy one to know about, because it's all about looking at it from our perspective. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? And what do we therefore want to shift and change? The downside is that when somebody is being objectively victimized, and this is especially true when you go back to look at Dr. Cartman's original model, and they don't talk about approaches, they just talk about victim, persecutor, rescuer, is that we can go to the drama triangle and look for problematic behaviors that are in them, and then use that to blame the victim for their victimization. So what happens here is like, and also what ends up happening is that we talk about the persecutor role like it's this intellectualized thing, and like why somebody is doing it, but there's actual harm being done. And so this is the issue here, is that like, this actually came out, the reason this came up was because I had a conversation with a colleague of mine, and they knew that we were doing the shapes episode, and they love how we approach doing the shapes thing. They're like, can I ask you a question? I'm like, please do. I love it when people ask me questions, because it normally means there's going to be new content on the other side of it, or just a refinement or tweaking or further information required on the content we already put out there. And she said to me, so a child's always in victim, right? And I'm like, there is so much nuance to that sentence that you just said. Like, I don't even know where to start. Yes, I'm like, my head's exploding just thinking about the things I now have to share with you. I'm going to try and do this in a way that will not blow your mind as well. So the thing about it is that, and I was like, can you give me an example of what you're referring to in this situation? Because the truth of the matter is, and we're going to get into this a little bit more in our next episode, is that when we're talking about children and these dynamics, that it's not clear cut. Because the truth of the matter is children don't have the ability to 100% take responsibility for and ensure their own needs are met. So their ability to get into the empowerment ecosystem or their influence to be in the drama triangle is not coming from within themselves. They don't yet have the autonomy to be able to do that. And there's more nuance with other dependents as well. So I'm like, well, for starters, if we're talking about a child, the drama triangle doesn't apply in the same way as it does when we're talking about adults with adults. So give me an example of what you're referring to here. And she was explaining to me that when she's talking to adults, but she's talking to adults who are looking back and healing harm that was done to them when they were a child. And it's like looking at like where the responsibility is, where the blame is, like da 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 da. And I'm like, well, what you're talking about here is not an approach. Like the children are not like taking a victim approach, and therefore that's why they're being abused or but trigger warning for abuse and other problematic dynamics, because we are going to be talking about them a lot in this episode. Should have mentioned that before I use the A word, but we will put a trigger warning on the show notes. So you should know about that before you get to this point. And so when you're talking about, I'm like, that's not a persecutor approach or a victim approach. That is an actual harm that is being done. Harm has been done to this child, and it needs to be viewed and approached as looking at it for the harm first and the approach is second. Because yes, it's true, the approaches may be relevant, but the first and most important thing is you've got to recognize what is actually happening and what is happening from an objective standpoint with respect to needs being compromised. So this shape, the harm dynamic, which can sometimes be described as the abuse dynamic. I love that I say sometimes can be described as like it's been out there in the world for ages. It's only existed for a couple of weeks. But I think that it's a good, like if you're looking at abusive situations, this is the shape that you need to be looking at first and foremost. But it also is in generalized harm that is going on. So this shape is about purely looking at the harm being done, the impact of that harm, and so that we can then focus on responsibility and accountability where it belongs in the triangle. Because sometimes what can end up happening is if someone goes, oh, this person's in the victim in the drama triangle. Well, the second you do that and you put it in the context of drama triangle and therefore approaches, it could sound like, well, therefore the approach they're taking is creating their victimhood and therefore they are partially responsible. No. That's not how this works. This is about looking at the harm that is being done. And if we are in victim approach to how we are dealing with a situation, that is a very different thing that sometimes can end up layered onto this. Trust me, this will make more sense the further we go on. So the harm dynamic is relevant in situations of objective harm, to name harmful behavior and its impact and place responsibility where it belongs, primarily on the harmer, secondarily on the witness, and sometimes on the intervener, depending on how they intervene, never on the victim. So we'll be putting the harm dynamic, in fact, it's probably already on the screen right now, on the screen so you can see it. So the harm dynamic, it's a black triangle, and I also went with the color coded vibes for today. I made sure I wore black to kind of represent the shapes. I've tried to do that with some of the other shapes as well. Anyway, so it's a black triangle with a point at the bottom. And you have the victim at the bottom, you have the harmer up to the right, and you have the intervener up to the left. And then the witness is like an extra little line that comes off of the harmer position, because the witness is actually also harming the victim. And we'll get to that a little bit more in just a second. So this dynamic is about the impact of each position, not the approach or the intent. The intent is completely irrelevant when it comes to this. And we use this to create distinction from the positions in the drama triangle to ensure they don't get confused or conflated, where it's like, okay, this is this and this is this. It's like, well, let's be clear. Are we talking about impact or are we talking about approach? We're talking about impact. We're going to be looking at the harm dynamic. If we're talking about approach, we're going to be talking about the drama triangle. So these four positions. So the victim is a very easy position to describe. Their needs are being negatively impacted by the harmer. Simple. The harmer, also the abuser role, if we're looking at it from in that context, are also very easy to describe. They are the one who is negatively impacting one or more of the victim's universal needs. Now, the witness is the one that I can see people going, what do you mean the witness is doing harm? I don't understand that. Well, the reason that the witness to harm being done is an extension of the harmer role is because they are complicit in the harm that is being done. They're an extension of the harmer because of that complicity, because they're seeing what's happening but not intervening. It also creates this environment of permissibility. By not intervening, it kind of implies that they're okay with the behavior. And it's like when you see something that is being done that is not okay, and you don't speak up to say that it's not okay, you add to that environment where this person goes, well, it must be okay because nobody's saying anything that it isn't okay. This is the difference. Like when we talk about, and trigger warning, we're just about to talk about oppression dynamics. So for example, this is the reason that we say it's not enough to not be racist. You have to be actively anti-racist or anti-racist if you're from the UK. It's not enough to not be a misogynist. You have to be actively anti-misogyny because you can still be passive but engaging with that position. So, for example, if somebody tells a racist joke in your in earshot when you're one of the people who's witness to it, by not speaking up and saying that's not okay, you can't say that. You are letting the person know who's doing the harm that what they're doing, you're endorsing it by kind of not saying anything. You're implying that there is nothing wrong with it. Same thing with a sexist joke. If somebody tells a sexist joke and you don't speak up and say anything about it, or say that it's that there's something wrong with it, or intervene in the situation in another way, shape, or form, again, you're implying that there's nothing wrong with it, and it creates this environment of permissibility. And this is something that's very tough for people to really understand because they don't want to understand it. It's tough to recognize that, hold on a second, by me witnessing something and not speaking to that something, I am actually part of that harm. But unfortunately, it's true. And we're going to get to some examples in the next episode. That the next episode is going to be kind of cool, because what we're going to do is we're going to look at all of these different shapes in the context of some famous movies. And so we're going to describe these things so that you might be able to understand. Because sometimes when you put, like, I was going to say real world examples, obviously they're not real world examples because they're fictional, because they're movies. I mean, and because we're not talking about documentaries here, we're talking about actual fictional movies. And sometimes the fact that it's fictional, it gives you you're kind of one step removed from it. So it makes it a little bit easier to see because you're less maybe invested in it than you would be if it was a real situation that you were watching. So that's going to help to explain this. This is going to become much clearer. And this particular piece, like specifically, is going to become much clearer when we get into the examples in the next episode. Okay, we just had to take a teeny tiny pause from recording. Serena got a delivery of a caffeinated beverage that's going to help her get through the rest of the recording today.
I have to say, I love this. Like, it's super cute. Like, right. I love the shape of this. It's different. I like it.
Yeah,
and a paper straw, which I love. I love disposable straws when they're bamboo. Like, Save the Turtles, I'm all for it. But these are never a good idea. Like, it's going to be a mushy mess in a bit. But
it gets mushy. It looks like a chocolate milkshake. That's what it looks like. That's what I can, like, I'm tasting in my mouth from looking at it.
I've deviated. We are going on a total tangent for a minute. So buckle up, join the ride. For my own health and well-being, I realized my coffee every morning wasn't serving me. I wasn't sleeping well at night. There were a lot of things kind of adding up. So I've moved to tea in the morning. Every morning I have a cup of tea instead of a cup of coffee. I sleep better.
I generally is complete. Like the Brits got her drinking tea every morning.
And it's just black tea. I don't put anything in it. Like, right? Well, not black tea, but it's tea without anything in it. Right. So now I drink coffee as like I want the experience of coffee, because that's really why I was drinking. Like, I like the experience of coffee. I like the flavors. I like, supporting local coffee shops and like seeing how they do their thing. However, I've noticed since I stopped drinking coffee every morning, my coffees are a little bit like, I've always gotten iced hazelnut mocha. That's my easy go-to. I don't know what I want. Get me that. I will drink and enjoy. But they tend to err a little bit more on the desserty side now. I'm like, whipped cream? You have whipped cream? Yes, put whipped cream on it. This is my one coffee a week. And I do believe that influence is on the other side of the screen.
So, because people often say to me like about drinking coffee, and I was like, oh no, I don't drink coffee. I have dessert in a mug. Like that's like if I have a coffee, every now and again, in extreme circumstances, I need a pick me up right now. But generally, she says, drinking it right now. If I'm wanting a pick me up, I tend to drink kombucha. It's black tea.
I've seen you drink like 3 coffees in our entire friendship that were the pick me up, just a little bit of like oat milk in it or something.
It's very, very rare for me to drink coffee for I need a pick me up. And that is a very, very extreme situation. Like it happens very, very rarely because it doesn't work for my system either. But like any time that I do have coffee, and a lot of time I will drink decaf coffee, but I will still have all the other shit in it because I like that. That's like that's what I want. I want the flavor. I don't need the caffeine. I want the experience of having a drink that I love the taste of. And that's, and I like coffee in the context of all those other flavors. Coffee on its own, I'm a little bit like, meh, it's okay. Like, I'm not a coffee fan in terms of flavor, just as a coffee flavor on its own. Like, I never liked coffee ice cream, coffee chocolates, tiramisu doesn't do anything for me. So anyway, enough about our little coffee, connoisseur moments, or dessert in a cup connoisseur moments. So when we paused, Serena reminded me that I'd actually I didn't use the full title for the first position on the harm dynamic shape, which is objective victim. It's not just victim, it's objective victim. So this is, and the thing I want to say about this is that a lot of the time when you say objective victim, this sometimes makes people think that they have to like, well, I don't see that person's a victim, therefore they're not an objective victim. I'm like, no, that's not what that means. It is that their needs are being negatively impacted by another person. You have to be informed somewhat about this to be able to discern whether or not somebody is an objective victim in this situation. Being a TikTok expert does not mean qualify you to be able to do this. And I can see people doing it and being like, oh no, that's not objective victimhood. Okay, when you understand needs to the level that we do, let's have a conversation, and maybe you are correct. And I'm open to being incorrect about these things. But I think that when we're talking about objective victimhood in the context of needs, you really have to understand where is objective victimhood? Where are the needs being impacted? Are the needs being impacted, or are they just not being met by somebody who has an expectation or entitlement to get them met? Very different situation, because that's one of these situations where this dynamic, this shape can be used. Well, you're harming me. No, those needs were never my responsibility to meet in the first place. Those are your needs. They're your responsibility.
And I also think like your privilege and or marginalization plays a lot into that too, because opinions, if you don't have the lived experience of whatever that objective victimization is, it doesn't matter. Like if you don't have it, you cannot put yourself completely in that space to know.
Well, a step further removed from that, like a lot of the time, if you have privilege, the system by design hides these dynamics from us, the more privilege that we have. So it may not be that you have the lived experience so you don't understand it. Maybe you just can't fucking see it because you've not been taught to look for it, and it's not affecting you as directly. I mean, it is affecting you. Interconnectedness of needs, shared humanity, yada yada yada. You've heard me talk about this ad infinitum on this podcast, or at great length on this podcast. But you may literally not be able to see it. For the longest time, there were certain things I didn't see and I didn't know. That doesn't mean to say objective harm was not being done.
There are still certain things like all of a sudden
where you're going. I'm like,
either I'll be in it and I'm like, oh shit, like what the hell is going on here? Or I'll come back, and a lot of times like Claire and I play mirror for each other quite a bit, and I'll be saying something and she's like, okay, like let's get into that a little bit more. And then it's like, oh wow, I didn't even see that. Like, and
I remember a very specific instance where we were driving home. We had been to a store, and Serena had an interaction with the person who owned the store, and she had a perception of what had gone on. And on the way home, I pointed out that there was a power dynamic that was in existence there that she wasn't aware of, and I thought that something very different was happening. And I remember being like, oh shit, I didn't even see that. And I'm like, yep, that's what's going on. So when we talk about objective victim, this is where their needs are being negatively impacted by the harmer. So lots and lots of nuance around that. We'll get into that a little bit further. Don't worry. So we've gone through the objective victim, the harmer, the witness, and the intervener. And the next one, is the intervener or helper. So depending on the approach being taken, this could be a rescuer approach. It could be a supporter approach. It could be a contributor approach. And depending on the approach, this intervention could help the situation or add further harm to the situation. So this is like, I'm going to get really geeky now. I was going to say this is like Schrodinger's position. And I don't even know whether you know what that means. I think you do. Because
like Schrodinger's cat.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So there's a scientific theory, which is that it came from an experiment where the scientist was called Schrodinger, and it's referred to Schrodinger's cat, where the experiment was a cat in a box with a poison pellet that would release at some random point in the future. Now, the interesting thing is, I mean, obviously we're not in support of this, but what we're talking, so basically what the theory is that because you don't know when the poison will release, that the cat can be thought of as both alive and dead until you open the box and reveal which it is. And so that's the same thing with the intervener or helper position, is that you are, until you actually see what the approach is, you won't necessarily know whether this is doing harm or whether it is helping and adding support until we get to that point. So this lots and lots of nuance around all of this. As we were saying before, the harm dynamic is about the impact of each of these roles and positions. But it's important to recognize that, yes, the impact is important and relevant, but also the drama triangle or empowerment ecosystems could be layered on top of this. So you can be in, as we were just describing with the intervener or helper, you could be in the intervener or helper position within the harm dynamic. And depending on how you approach it, you could be in a rescuer approach or a supporter approach or a contributor approach. So let's now go through each of these positions in the harm dynamic and talk about what approaches they could be in.
Well, that's not at all confusing. I promise we're going to make it a little less confusing, but I can only imagine my brain was just like, I know these shapes are like ingrained in my brain. And I'm like, all right, where the hell are we? We're layering. We got steps. Yes. There's a slide here. I don't like, it's a little fun house of shapes.
So let's explain this, because I think that once we explain it, it will make a lot more sense. Mm-hmm. So let's start off with the objective victim position. So if you're in the objective victim position, i.e. you are being harmed by somebody else, you might be in the victim approach with how you are dealing with the fact that you are being victimized, or you might be in the creator approach with how you are approaching the fact that you are being victimized. So for example, like if somebody is hurling verbal abuse at me, for example, that is actual harm. There is a harm dynamic going on. I am the objective victim in this situation. There is a harmer in the situation. And so that's true from an impact standpoint. From an approach standpoint, as the person in that objective victim position, if I'm in the victim approach, I could be like, oh God, this is awful. Poor me. This is so terrible. I wish somebody would come along and do something about this. I don't really feel like I can do anything right now. I feel stuck in the situation. Like that would be me approaching that verbal abuse in a victim approach position. If I went into the creator approach position with dealing with that same thing, I could be like, okay, so I'm getting this verbal abuse right now. What is my outcome right now? My outcome is not to be dealing with this right now. What are my options? I could leave the situation. I could confront the person. I could ask somebody else if they wouldn't mind helping me out in the situation, i.e. for someone else to come in to be the supporter or the contributor position. Okay, I'm going to choose the option that I'm just going to leave and exit the situation. So I'm going to get my things and I'm going to exit stage left so that I'm no longer dealing with that situation. The same thing is happening to me. I'm still being objectively victimized by this person, but how I am approaching that situation is very different, because one is the victim approach position and one is the creator approach position. Now, it's important to say here, being in the victim approach does not make them responsible for being victimized. That responsibility for that that impact of that harm is always on the harmer. All it will do is it will affect your recovery and healing process from being the victim of somebody else's behavior. Because if I'm getting that kind of verbal abuse thrown at me, and I'm like, I don't really think there's anything I can do about it. I don't know what to do. Oh, this is awful. I feel really stuck right now. I'm going to be absorbing more of it. And I'm not really focused on, okay, what do I want? Like, what I'm just in the pit that is that moment. If, as I said, I go into creator approach, I could be like, okay, first I want to get myself out of the situation. So I remove myself from the situation. And then what's the final step of the creator process? What's next? The next thing is I want to heal from the impact of what was just happened to me. So maybe I will verbally process that with somebody else. Maybe I'll journal about it. Maybe I will have a bit of a cry. Maybe I will punch a pillow because I'm angry about the fact that happened to me. Like there's all of these things. And then once we've got to that point, so the next thing is maybe I want to actually for there to be some accountability. So maybe if I was at a venue and this happened, maybe I would go to the venue and say, look, this happened to me while I was at your establishment. I think that your staff needs to be better trained on how to deal with this situation so that somebody else can come in and support somebody if they find themselves in the situation. So that's what, like, as you can see, neither of these approaches changes the impact of what is happening to me, but it will change how quickly I will recover, how well I will recover, and what that process will look like. Because some people in that situation, if you're a victim approach, you might go into the avoidance thing where it's like, I'm just going to pretend this isn't happening right now, or just pretend it hasn't happened. And it's just going to sit inside the system and it's not really going to, there's no benefit. You're not going to process it. And then you might distract yourself by going and doing something completely different. But that's not, it's another avoidance thing. I'm going to go distract myself so that I can avoid feeling the consequences, the impact on my unmet needs of the thing that happens to me, versus saying, okay, maybe the first thing I want to do is in creator approaches, I want to get out of the situation and then I want to process it. And then it may be, now I want to heal the impact of what's happened to me. So now I look at, okay, which needs were impacted by this happening? What can I do to meet those needs for myself right now so that I can improve the healing? So you see those two different approaches. It's going to dramatically affect the speed and effectiveness at which we're going to be able to recover and heal from the victimization that we have experienced. Mm-hmm. So next one is the harmer position. Now, the harmer position is almost always in the persecutor approach, whether they're consciously or unconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally. But the reality is, if somebody is negatively impacting somebody else's needs, they are almost, I can't think of a situation where you would negatively impact somebody else's needs without doing it with the purpose of trying to get your own met or mask from them being unmet.
But does that make them, you could be in the harmer role and be in rescuer too, couldn't you? Because like you are harming the needs of the other person, or is it that kind of,
I think that what ends up happening is that you might come in on the rescuer approach, but almost as soon as you're in the rescue approach, you become persecutor approach. So it's like the harm being done. Ping. Yeah, it's the quick ping in the same way as you could be victim and then ping into persecutor approach. But I think that the harmer role almost always, and I'm saying almost always because guarantee you at some point someone's going to come and go, what about this? And I'm going to go, okay, fair play.
Nuance,
that may
nuance,
be a rescuer. Nuance, exactly. But this is like, we're talking in generalizations because we want you to understand, for the most part, what's going to be happening. Mm-hmm. And if they're in the persecutor approach, by extension, they are also in the victim approach first and foremost, because that's true of everyone in the persecutor approach, rescue approach, and victim approach. You see the thinking.
If they're in the persecutor approach, aren't they automatic? Like, if you're in the persecutor approach, are you automatically in the harm dynamic?
Almost certainly, yes.
Okay.
Again,
like I get how the objective victim could go either way, but I feel like if you are in that, it's like fairly solidly in that corner.
Yes, I think that. So, for example, let me give you an example where I'll give you a nuanced example. So say you are, you're irritated by somebody and you create a plan in your mind to do something to negatively impact them. You're in the persecutor approach from the second you start thinking about it. When you start harming them is the point you're in the harmer approach. because maybe there's a delay between one and the other. So yeah,
like
you're almost certainly going to get
persecutor.
there. So yeah, you're going to be in the persecutor approach from the very get-go. Like the very start, the very second that your energy shifts to like, how dare they? I'm going to take them down a peg or two. Da 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 da. Like at that point, you may not actually be doing harm yet. The chances are you will, and you're going to get to that point. But that's why I'm saying like there's nuance around this. So just because you're in the persecutor approach doesn't automatically mean you're in the harmer approach. It means unless something happens, you're almost certainly going to get there.
It's like the gateway to the harmer approach.
Yes,
like
absolutely. And a lot of the time you're right. If you're in the persecutor approach, you are in the harmer approach too. I'm not saying that is the majority of instances. I like to try and find where the exceptions are so people can see this is not an always in all situations thing. It is something where we need to be aware that there is nuance in all of these situations. Almost all of them. Again. So the next position is the witness approach. The witness approach is also in the persecutor approach, whether consciously or unconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally, and by extension the victim approach, again because they are creating harm by what they are doing. Now the interesting thing is, depending on the situation, depending on the other power dynamics that are present, they may also be in the victim approach, because there may be a power that the persecutor approach position person has over the person who's in the witness position. So again, there's muddiness here. It may be more than one at the same time, but if they're with respect to the person who is being harmed, the objective victim in the situation, they are in the persecutor approach position because they are doing harm to the victim by adding this air of permissibility, by not intervening, by implying that what is happening is okay. And by extension, if they're in the persecution approach, as we know, they're going to be in the victim approach first and foremost as well. And then the intervener, this is a very interesting role, because depending on how it's being approached, you could intervene as a rescuer and add further harm to the situation, because you intervene as a rescuer, as we were just talking about, you've been straight over into the persecutor approach, and you end up doing harm to the objective victim as well. So there becomes another layer of objective harm this person is experiencing. Or you could look at the situation and come at it from creator approach first and foremost, like what is happening here? What is my outcome? How do I want to go about doing this? And you then may step into the supporter approach or the contributor approach with respect to the person in that objective victim position, which will, and depending on which one of these approaches, it will affect the extent to which you further help the situation or further harm the situation. So, as I said, that intervener role can be one of a number of things, but the most important thing is, if you want to intervene in a situation and you do not want to add further harm to the situation, you have to intervene as a creator first and foremost. You have to come into it as a creator, see the person who is being objectively victimized, the harm being done to them does not stop them from being a creator. See them as a creator and see, how do you support? How do you contribute? So, like, for example, one of the examples that I saw as a what to do if you see somebody being harassed on public transport. They were describing situations where, like, and I think this was, I don't know whether this was on the London Underground, but I think it was, the example I saw was, if you were to see somebody on the London Underground who maybe was undergoing a racist attack, who maybe was undergoing a misogynistic attack or something, one of the things that they actually suggest that people do in that situation, rather than confronting the harmer in that situation, is actually to go and sit with the objective victim and start asking them questions like, hey, how are you doing? I wanted to be here so you're not alone. Is there would you like to do like, and depending on how close the other person is and what the safety considerations are about the situation, would depend on how you would do it. But be like, would you like me to call anybody? Should we get off at the next stop together? Let's go, and I'll stay with you until. But again, in that situation, that's not somebody who is rescuing, the rescuer person would be, da, 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 come in, let me get in between you, or let me like pull you out of this situation. You're there to be with them. And then you're asking them questions to help them to decide what they think. Because the chances are, if the person being victimized in that situation has probably dealt with these sorts of things before and probably knows more about what's going to escalate or de-escalate the situation than you probably do, especially if you don't hold the same amount, the same level of marginalization, or and if you have a privilege that they don't, that they sometimes, if you jump in and you go at the harmer, that can amplify the situation, and the person who is the objective victim, they can pay the price for that, because there's more to it. Especially a good example of this is when trigger warning, we're going to talk about domestic abuse. We gave a trigger warning earlier that we're going to talk about a lot of problematic things in this because we're talking about objective harm being done, but like in domestic abuse situations or domestic violence situations, sometimes the abuser knowing that somebody else knows what's going on and seeing what somebody else knows can actually make the situation worse for the person who is being abused. Even if that person's coming in and going, what the hell are you doing? Why are you treating her like that? When they go home, or they're behind closed doors, or they're away from a situation, or she's on her own and vulnerable, then it can be way worse for them than it was in the first place. So this is one of those ways in which, like, if you, as an intervener, you don't have to intervene as I'm going to stop the harm that's being done. You can intervene as a supporter or as a contributor to the person who is being objectively victimized, objectively harmed in that situation, and offer support in a way that you are staying centered in your creator approach, and you are also recognizing them as a creator approach themselves.
Something that kind of stood out when you were talking is you used the word if somebody was being like verbally attacked. And I think that the word attacked has like this like initial kind of reaction to most people. It feels big, it feels harsh, it feels like obvious. I can't tell you how many times, and especially in my past, looking back, I had like, oh geez, like,
right,
like, oh fuck, Serena, like, yeah, not you're an asshole moments, but back then, yeah, I was totally what an asshole.
You were behaving
Serena.
like an asshole.
I was behaving like an asshole because I was complicit with things that innocent fun, like, and we're gonna get into that a little bit more in a different episode.
It's just
but like,
a joke. You're taking things too seriously.
How many times have we as a society stood by when we know they're like, I'm going to put it into a situation that I can personally speak to, which is having a joke about like a derogatory joke about a female. And then like being uncomfortable, being obviously uncomfortable, or being in a situation where I particularly wasn't uncomfortable, but seeing that somebody else was uncomfortable and just either not saying anything, laughing along. And there is a safety aspect that we'll get into later about that. And like, it doesn't have to be a raw attack, but an attack to somebody's
needs.
And that's something I want to bring in. Like, it happens so often, and you kind of, as with everything, the more you get into this intervening from a contributor or a supporter role after coming into creator yourself, it becomes kind of second nature, where you do things that kind of flow with the situation. You become more mindful of these harm aspects that you may have been playing into or that are around. And it's like, right, dude, like it could be like, dude, that's not funny, or
so a great example, and what can often happen in these situations is that one decision can switch you from a witness to an intervener. So there's an example that kind of comes to my mind, which is I was being interviewed for a like video podcast thing many years ago, and during the course of the interview, the interviewer used an ableist term. It's the C word. If you don't know what the C word is, go and listen to the C word episode. We'll put the link in the show notes so you'll be able to find it. But it's an ableist term. It's a derogatory mental health slur, basically. And this person used the term. And in that moment, if I had chosen not to say anything, I would have been a witness, because I would have been contributing to the belief that it's okay to use that term, and that it wouldn't. And maybe this person was doing harm without knowing. Maybe they didn't intend to do harm. Maybe they didn't plan to do harm, but they did. They were doing harm in that situation. And And interestingly enough, I think that's maybe one of the situations also where maybe you're not in the persecutor approach, but you are still in the harmer position, because it's like if you are doing harm without any knowledge of the fact that you're doing harm because you didn't know something, that's a situation again where there might be that distinction and difference between the two. So in that moment, and in my head, obviously I'm trying to listen to what she's saying, I'm trying to think about what I want to say next, and in my head, like, all the alarm bells are ringing. I'm like, I have to do something, I have to say something. Now the interesting thing is what I said was so momentary that I didn't create a big thing about it. I didn't make a big issue out of the whole thing. All I said was, well, I wouldn't use the C word because that's a mental health slur, but I agree that it is da 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 da. And I replaced the word that was problematic with an alternative word that I actually thought was what she really meant. Because the truth of the matter is that's not that she was using lazy language the way that most of us do when we before we know better. And I replaced the word and I continued the conversation on. And I remember in that moment seeing the look on her face because she was like, oh, okay. And we moved on. And it wasn't this big deal, but in that moment, if I hadn't said anything, I would have been a witness and I would have been contributing to the harm of anyone listening to that recording who was negatively impacted. Their needs were harmed by the use of a slur that was against them. And
it would have been you perpetuating something you knew was wrong.
Sorry?
It would have been you perpetuating something that you knew was wrong. Like,
yes,
that word doesn't bother everybody. We know that because of how
prevalent it is,
fluent it is, prevalent it is in our language, and we know that does do harm to people. So for that reason, whether that person is listening or not, we don't want to perpetuate that this is okay. And I do that replacement, and we've had an episode on like replacement language. I think that actually is the C word episode.
I think we've done a couple of them. We've done a couple of them where we've spoken about it. We definitely, the C word is one of the episodes we do. I think we might have done it on one more as well. I'm not sure.
Whatever we have, we're going to throw in the
many
show
episodes
notes.
in at this point. I'm not 100% sure anymore. My internal Rolodex of episode guide is not as it was when we were only sort of 12 episodes in.
Right. That was episode 8. It's like, no, I don't know. But yeah, that was, I just wanted to mention that,
in my head, because that's exactly the thing, is like, and because I can also see people going, well, what if nobody listened to that episode that would have been negatively impacted by it? The truth of the matter is I was creating an environment where people would think it's okay to use that term by not saying anything. So yeah, maybe the people listening weren't going to be negatively impacted, but maybe the people listening, when I said what I said, all of a sudden now they've got a thought in their mind, maybe that's a term I should try and find alternatives to, so they don't do harm by using the term in other situations where it would negatively impact other people. So this is where
it doesn't have to be a big thing to have a big impact in that sense.
No. And it's like, and this is where, like, especially in terms of the empowerment ecosystem, we have to be aware that we are all part of this wider community. And I might do something over here that impacts this person, this person, this person, this person. And through that community, actually, it's then going to impact other people that I don't even know exist. And that's one of the things that's really important within this. It's really important to recognize that approach and intent is irrelevant with this shape. It does not matter. And you have to deal with this shape before you can deal with the others. Like, it's so important that you deal with the objective harm that is being done. You address that. If you need to know how to do that, go back and listen to our Apology Blueprint episode where we literally give you all the steps to addressing the harm that has been done. So you go through and you address the harm being done. Now, once you've addressed the harm being done, then you can start to look at, okay, what was my intention here? What was my approach? Why did I do this? How, like, which position was I in? Oh, yeah, I see. I was in the victim approach and I didn't like being the victim approach. And so I acted in a way which put me in the persecutor approach. And that was what enabled me to do harm to somebody else. So I now need to do what I need to do to address the unmet needs that were causing me to be in the victim approach and the persecutor approach, so that I don't do that in the future. And when I notice this situation happening going forward in the future, how am I going to approach it from a creator approach position? Because if the second I go into, okay, no, I'm not, like, there might be an impulse to go into the harmer role because of the persecutor approach that we're in, and that's our like warning sign to be like, nope, we're in the persecutor approach. We need to get into the creator approach. What's my outcome here? How am I going to create my outcome in a self-first way? And that's what will have us going like into the green shape, into the empowerment ecosystem. This is about looking at what happened, who is responsible for it, and who was harmed for it. We can then look at the empowerment ecosystem for how we want to heal from the objective harm being done in the situation. We can then look at the empowerment ecosystem for how to heal from the thing that caused us to move into a position and an approach that was going to cause, like we've said it before, all of the positions in the disempowerment dynamic, in the drama triangle, they negatively impact us as well. So we can look at what we did, how we got there, and how we might want to therefore do things differently in the future. But the most important thing is to address the harm first and foremost. And also in that context, recognize where the responsibility is. So go back to the story that we were talking about, which is where this shape came from in the first place, which is like when we were talking about a child who had been harmed as a child. The responsibility of that harm is on the harmer and whatever witnesses there are to the harm being done who are not acting to intervene and to do something to address it and to prevent the harm, stop the harm from happening and prevent it from happening again in the future. And so it's so important that we start off there and we look at it and say, from my position, this was not my responsibility if I'm in the objective victim role. One of the most important things you can do as an objective victim is say, it is not my responsibility that this has happened to me. What is my responsibility is what I'm going to choose to do about it. And that's where we can drop into that creative position to connect with our healing, to connect with our wanting to hold people accountable, to connect with justice, to connect with setting boundaries so that we're not going to be in that situation with that person again in the future. All of those things are valid, but the harm dynamic is such an important it's so important. I cannot believe it doesn't already exist, because we have to look at these things objectively and look at the impact and the harm being done. Then we can look at the why and the approaches secondarily. So the next thing that we want to talk about is the witness position, because the witness position is doing harm. We know they are complicit in the situation. And there's a lot of nuance with the witness position, because and what I will say is, if you are in the witness position, it is your responsibility to figure out, what can I do from the witness position? Get into creator approach. What can I do? Again, it may be that you were in the witness position and that what can I do shifts you into the intervener, like we were talking about with the public transport situation. You can go from being a witness to the situation to being an intervener in a supporter approach position, helping the person and focusing on the person who is being the objective victim role, the person who's being harmed in the situation. But I think that when it comes to so you first and foremost, you need to look at, what can you do? What is your outcome? What can you do? There are going to be instances where there are different power dynamics at play, different levels of privilege, different levels of oppression, where there may be a safety aspect that means that you cannot intervene in the way you would like to in that moment. And so you have to, again, what is my outcome here? My outcome here is to help the situation. What are my options for how I can do that? Well, one of them is to intervene and try and stop this harm from being done. The next one might be, if I don't feel like I can safely do that, then maybe the next thing for me to do is to record the incident so that the person being harmed has some evidence of what is happening. And maybe while I'm recording it, I can then put a social pressure on the other people present who maybe do have the power to do something about it, to get involved. So for example, like I've seen so many instances of videos online where a young or a female person is being attacked either verbally or physically by a somebody who I'm assuming, based on what I know about the situation, is a man. And there are men all around doing nothing. Those men, witness position, those men are complicit. And you might have a woman there who's like, well, I don't have the physical strength to be able to stop him, but maybe what I can do is I can record and I can start saying, can you step in and do something about this? There's 5 of you. There's 1 of him. If you wanted to, you could stop this right now. And you can maybe create some social pressure with the video to be like, hey, this is your opportunity to do something. So let me give an example of something that happened that went viral from the Florida Keys not that long ago, a few months ago, a couple of months back, where there was a kid on a fishing boat. Yeah, kid on a fishing boat, and this guy in persecutor approach, in harmer position, decided that this kid,
he was in a different fucking reality, honestly, to think this was okay.
he was. So here's the thing is that, so what ended up happening was, and there are videos of this online. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I think that what ended up happening was this guy had thought that the kid in the boat had, I don't know whether he'd come through and there'd been a wake or something in the morning and it had affected his boat or something, that he thought that the kid had done something that had negatively affected him earlier in the day. Well, as it turns out, it wasn't this kid. It wasn't anything to do with him. This guy was not listening to reason. He was shouting and screaming, and this kid, like by comparison, and this kid was so polite and respectful in how he dealt with it. Yes, sir. No, sir. I'm like, no, that wasn't me, sir. That was somebody else. Like, he was so respectful. This guy not only threatened this kid and shouted verbal abuse, he actually boarded his ship, which I know this is going to sound ludicrous to people who don't live in an area that is surrounded by water. That is piracy. That is illegal. Like, you cannot do that.
That's a no-go. That's like a
hard
no-go. Like, even if you know the person, like, you don't
if you do not have consent to join on a boat, you do not join on a boat. And it's like, I think to people from the UK, they think about like pirates as these like people in movies or old stories and everything. It's like, no, that is an actual thing. There's a reason that those stories exist, and it is still illegal today. And the interesting thing is that there were other men who were on the other boat with the guy that was losing his shit, shall we say, to use a very technical term. They did nothing. And this was one of those moments where those people were witnesses, because by not saying anything, they were implying that what he was doing okay. Now, also, there was an element of somewhat a feeling of like, again, they were other men, so the chances of them being able to influence the situation very high. They were also on his boat, so I can imagine that there might have been a little bit oh, I feel a little bit uncomfortable. But let's be clear, discomfort is not a lack of safety, and people are so avoidant of being uncomfortable. People are so avoidant of being uncomfortable that they misunderstand that their discomfort is actually costing somebody else their safety. So these men's discomfort and allowing this guy to do the stuff that he did created and added to the harm to the situation where this kid was literally in physical harm.
And in fear of his, like, you can see he was in fear of his safety.
His life.
Wasn't it, now that I'm thinking, wasn't it one of the people on the original the guy's boat that was videotaping it?
No, I think that the video was on, there may have been on both boats. I don't know. I saw the one that I think was, it was on the kids' boat.
The kids' boat.
Because it was the kids' boat position that I remember seeing. But that's the thing, is in that situation, it is your responsibility to step in. Like, they had almost certainly been drinking. This guy was definitely seemed out of control in that moment.
He was belligerent.
Yes, to the extreme. And the interesting thing is, the more privilege you have, the more social power you have in those situations to do something about it. So it's your responsibility to use your privilege in those situations to step in. Because if every other man on that boat had said, listen, dude, you do you, I'm not comfortable with this. This is not okay what you're doing right now. I would like you to take me back to shore right now. Or what you're doing is not okay. Like, you cannot go and step on another person. You know that. You know it's the law. Like, and hold him accountable in that moment. That person could have been an intervener. Again, intervener rather than rescuer, because the second you go into rescuer, then the chances are this other guy's going to feel like the victim approach and you're the persecutor approach, and it all gets very fucking messy. But so you could come into it with a creator. Like, what's my outcome here? My outcome here is to get this guy, one, to stop what he's doing first and foremost. So the very first thing you could have said to him is that, look, listen, like, this isn't worth it. Let's go to so-and-so. Let's go to one of the sandbars that we know about. Let's go back to Doc. Let's go I need to go back right now and get him out of that situation. And then once you're out of that situation, because that's the first thing, like, apology blueprint, first thing, act to avert further harm, prevent further harm. Get him out of the situation first. Then once he's out of that situation and there's not so much of an audience, there's not so much social pressure, at that point I'd be saying, look, dude, I don't know what's going on with you. Like, are you okay? Because what you just did down there is not okay. Like, you can still come at it with compassion, not that anything he's got going on would justify that thing, but you can also come at it with a compassionate angle, which is like, are you okay right now? Like, is there something going on with you that I don't know about? Because then if the guy's like, no, why'd you ask? Like, because what you just did is completely not okay. Because you can then do that once you're at safety. Like, once you're like once we've been back at the dock, you can be like, dude, you cannot do that. And this guy,
the next day when he's sober, like,
right, exactly. The guy lost his business. I believe he lost his wife and his kid as well. Like, there were a lot of consequences to that. And it went viral
and
across the nation and in fact around the world, because I knew people in the UK. Like, I mean, I had a UK account and I'm seeing it, and I'm like, this is the keys. Like, this it was kind of weird seeing something go viral that's like however many miles up the street. But that was a good example where the kid is the objective victim. And this is another one of those where the guy is like, he's viewing himself as the objective victim. He was not the objective victim in that situation. Now, could there have been something that happened earlier that maybe he was the objective victim of somebody else's behavior? Possibly. That does not justify. And that's what ends up happening, is that maybe if he felt like the objective victim earlier, what ended up happening is that he took the victim approach in how he was dealing with that. So he went into the persecutor approach because he didn't like how the victim approach felt. And now I want to feel powerful, so I'm going to go in the victim approach. And then by being in I'm going to go into the persecutor approach, sorry. And when he went into the persecutor approach, then he started becoming the harmer to somebody else who was the objective victim.
I wanted to make a note of, especially when you're in the intervener role, to check that you are coming from the empowerment ecosystem and in the coming from that creator role, and specifically make sure that you are coming from a place of being self first. Because when Claire was giving the example of like an assault on a woman that, there's a bunch of men standing around. I have also, seen in television, news, movie, all of the things, and in real life, this kind of situation happen. And I have also seen it where there is somebody that intervenes. Like, I'm just going to set up a scenario where there is a woman and a man and they're getting into it. And it looks like there might be, like, it's going to escalate to somewhere that nobody, most people don't want it to go.
Right.
Another guy comes in and knocks out the guy that to protect, he intervened to end, to stop the situation.
Right.
Nuance. There are there are times where that is the necessary action from a safety
there's no other choice in a
view.
certain situation, right? Yeah.
Yes.
It's that rare, but yes.
And that's the last resort.
Yes.
If you want to come to it from a self first place, if the guy on the boat, if his friend was like, I think when you start touching somebody, especially in like a very worked up situation, like I know if I'm worked up and somebody touches me, I'm like that just releases a whole nother like burst of
new level unlocked. Yeah.
Yes. But there's a difference between like putting your hand out between the person and the person being confronted and being like, no, not okay. Well, and ripping his shirt back, making him fall back onto the boat, which stops the situation, but then creates harm. And then he does become the objective victim, and you don't want to start pinging around that one either.
And that's what those creator approach, like, that's why it's like a circular thing, which is like, you can try things and be like, let's try this and see if this works. And you like, I think that's part of the problem, is that the reason that a lot of times in these situations you can tell somebody's in rescue approach is because they go to the answer that's going to make them feel good. Like, because of all the conditioning around men and how they should be and be manly and be their protector and everything, like, that's the reason that someone's going to walk in there and punch guy like, yeah, look at me, I'm the hero, woohoo, like, where's my kiss and da da da, like, whatever. Like, that's very much what I can see happening in that situation. The key here is the most important person in this entire dynamic is the objective victim. And de-escalation is the most important attempt to begin with for an intervener. Like, your objective needs to be stopping the harm from being done in ideally a way that de-escalates the situation. Like, that is going to be what's because again, remember, we're in the empowerment ecosystem. We are mindful of the whole community. The harmer is still part of the community. Like, we need to be like, what's the best way through this, which is we de-escalate the situation so that we can get them to save face a little bit. I mean, and obviously it's not about prioritizing the feelings or comfort of the harmer in this situation, but actually, if we go in, like, say that this harm is being done because this person has chronically unmet needs, and the way that it is dealt with is the person further negatively impacts their needs. What's the chances this is going to happen again in a couple of weeks' time, or a couple of hours' time, or a couple of days' time? High. So let's see what we can do to de-escalate and see everyone as creators in this. Like, how many times have I seen really good de-escalation when it says like, look, I know you, I know this is not who you are. Come on. Like this isn't like, let's go and do something. Like, let's go do something else. Like, I know you, like, you're a good person. And like, you can speak to that. You can de-escalate the harm being done. Now, I'm not saying this is not about placating or ego stroking the person who is doing the harm. It's about doing it in a way where we prioritize. Remember, security need is the second need on our universal needs tree. And if we're talking about physical harm being done, we're talking about security need and foundation function need. So those are the first two needs of the tree. These are fundamental. So the most important priority should be maintaining the foundation and function and security of everyone. If you get to a point where you've tried everything you can think of and there is only one way to stop the harm from being done as a last resort, that is the only time that is and even at that point, then it's like, okay, then we move into the apology blueprint, and how can I, like, what other people around, how can we do this in a way that's going to be minimally harmful to everyone involved? And so yes, there is an element of, we need to be aware of our safety, we need to be aware of our privilege, we need to be understanding of the difference between safety and comfort. Massively different things when it comes to this, and there is so much nuance in these situations. Like, if you take anything that we've said today and you say, well, that gives me a license to do this, this, and this, you weren't listening. Go back and listen again, because that's not what we're saying. The most important thing is to come at it from a creative view. Everyone is a creator, being mindful of the community, being mindful of being self first, and attempt de-escalation as the first priority.
And I want to say something about de-escalation that's more in relation to people that you are in relationship with. There have been times where, especially like in my relationship with my husband, where all of a sudden we're in the harm dynamic and like I'm having a meltdown about something and I'm taking it out on him, and he's like, okay, what is going on here? I don't think this has anything to do with me. And it gives me a moment to be like, oh. wait a minute. Actually, it doesn't have anything to do with you. It's this, this, and this. And that one teeny little thing triggered, and it doesn't always happen like this. And there's been a lot of practice in my relationship with Claire and my relationship with Joe to make this be a fluid thing where it's not weird for us, where we can kind of call each other in and be like, what's going on? Like, do we need to talk about something? I need to process. Like, maybe I did do something. And like,
great question. Great question to start with. Are you okay? Are you okay? Like, because that one, it's going to have them answer the question internally. Well, no, I'm not okay right now. I mean, there are going to be someone who's like, no, I'm not fucking okay. What, do I look okay to you? Like, and that you can follow it. Like it feels like there might be something more going on right now. I just wanted to check in. Like, is there something I'm not aware of? Again, asking questions.
One for Joe and I mean, for us too. Is there anything we need to clear? Like, is there anything up right now? And there have been times where it's been like, Claire and I had this a couple of days ago where it's just a niggle on top of a niggle, and it really had nothing to do with each other. It was bigger situation than our teeny little niggles. And it's like, there's so much opportunity in this dynamic that like, and there's so much opportunity, and that opportunity is a perfect pathway over to the empowerment ecosystem.
Right.
Like,
and if you don't know what we're talking about, niggles, go back and look at our Claire and Niggles episode, which I think is part of our friendship series or a relationship series, one of the two. We'll put the link in the show notes. The other thing I want to say is that as we were talking about, I think it was in the last episode, when you are in that place where you start asking questions, what you are doing is you are being in creator mode. You are seeing the other person as a creator, and you're going into supporter mode. Like, is there something else that I don't know what's going on? Like, you're asking questions, not trying to tell them what they're supposed to be doing, not going, well, you're being an asshole right now. There better be a good reason for that. Like, that's not what we're saying here. We're saying
you're not trying to feel better about yourself in it.
Right. And like, the second I start to feel, and this is the reason that, like, no matter what is going on with my close people, if I get the sense that something ain't right, or they're doing something that is irritating me, and I start to kind of feel a little bit like I feel like little tingle of the drama triangle of like, what? I don't like that. No.
It's like the soft glow of red.
Yes. Well, like, oh no, you get out. The second I start to kind of notice those feelings, I'm like, is there something more going on right now? And my question, like, if somebody's running late, if somebody hasn't done something, if there's something, I mean, it happened the other day, like Serena and I were supposed to get on a call, and Serena said, are you available now? And I was like, yes, let's do it. Let's get on. And like 20 minutes later, she was like, oh, sorry, I was somewhere. But in the interim, like, initially I was like, I'm trying to do stuff. Like, I don't want to just sit around waiting for a call with you. But I'm like, maybe there's something else going on that I'm not aware of. And so I'm like, ask, are you okay? And then she was like, I tried to do something quick, which was not quick. So I like, and we got on the call. Like, but it's interesting how much, like, and I see it with other people, and I see the gap in awareness that happens. So like, I know that I had a friend of mine who's been going through some stuff recently. And I asked if they were okay. And they said, oh, not that great. And I gave a little heart emoji. Well, I was also going through it, but they didn't know that. And it was very interesting because I'm like, do you want to check in with me as well?
Reciprocation? No,
but it's because they're so in their own stuff right now that has ceased to exist. So I'm like, okay, I can take care of myself right now, and I'm still showing up and asking the questions and everything. But it's like, okay. And so often we're so involved with our own stuff that we stop looking at what other people are. And what ends up happening is that the express train to the drama triangle is when something happens and you make up a story in your mind as to why it has happened. That's the thing that is going to get you to the drama triangle faster than anything, which is like,
there, you'll hit every spot. You'll hit every stop on that train too.
Yes. It's like, oh, well, they must be doing this because they don't care about me, or they don't like me, or I'm not important enough, or they've just forgotten about me, or da. Chances are,
pinging the triangle in your own head. Like, you just said that, and I thought of a situation where it's like I got on as victim, and then all of a sudden I'm super fucking angry, and then I'm persecutor, and then I'm like, but I can do this, and I can rescue the situation. And like, even in my head, and nobody even knows that I've pinged, stopped at like every stop 6 times, and it's been 45 seconds. Like,
yes, it's so true. And so so in those moments, my invitation to you is to ask yourself, when you start down that track and you start to create a story in your own mind, is it possible that there's something else going on? That's the question to ask yourself. Is it possible that there's something else going on? And I've got a hint for you. It's always possible. Now, there might not be anything else going on, but it's always possible. Find out the information before you decide how you're going to respond to it. Find out what's really going on before you actually start to engage with it, because that way you're actually dealing with what is happening versus you're at the moment you're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist with people who have no clue that there's an issue going on, and you're doing it all by yourself, and that's when you're like along this triangle, and everyone else, and then you say something to the other person, they're like, wait, what? Like, and they don't even know something's happening. Like, they literally are completely clueless about the situation.
It's like you have a chapter book and all the chapters are in place, but the pages in between are blank. And you're like, all right, well, it says this chapter is about this. Let me just fill in this story because this is what I think it's about. Like,
yeah, absolutely. So the final thing I just wanted to say with respect to this is that just a little reminder that sometimes a situation requires intervention because it is an emergency. Sometimes you need to quote unquote rescue someone from harm. You need to be that intervener in the short term without being, you don't have time to go through the full process of figuring out, okay, how do I get into creator approach? How do I get into supporter approach or contributor approach? Like, for example, you're pushing someone out the way of a car, or you're helping them because they've slipped and about to fall down a severe drop, or stepping in front of them to stop them from falling down a hole they haven't noticed, or whatever it is. There are almost always going to be emergency exceptions to the ways that we would like to do things. And in situations like this, we don't have time to go through all the steps and what have you. It's so important, as we've said before, that there are some things that will help you respond better when you are doing things instinctively, without much thought or time. A little bit like we were talking about earlier about, like if you're in the empowerment ecosystem consistently, that general mindfulness becomes this thing that is not quite automatic, but it's ever present, and it doesn't require a lot of effort to kind of connect into. And so if you're doing something quickly without much thought, that's your go-to. So remember, one of the things you want to be doing is consistently meeting your own needs. The second thing is start to look at everyone as creators at all times, and you relate to people always as creators themselves. If you're in the empowerment ecosystem, you're doing this anyway. That's part of the empowerment ecosystem. And then as soon as the emergency is over, you can check in with them. Like, I'm so sorry. I didn't have time to think. It was like instinct took over. I'm so sorry if this crossed any boundaries. I'm like, are you okay? Do you need any further support? You can apologize for not being able to ask for consent or permission for whatever the thing was. Use the apology blueprint to do so, and think about other options that might have been better for you to draw on the next time that this situation happens. So it's important to recognize we're intervening in that situation, in an emergency situation. We might be intervening to stop that immediate harm, and then once the emergency is over, then you can drop back into creator approach, be like, okay, now I'm in this situation. Like there was that situation. We're not in the harm dynamic anymore, but now I'm dealing with the consequences of how I chose to deal with that in that emergency, and figure out from that creator approach position how I want to step into a supporter approach, contributor approach, or stay in creator approach with how we're going to deal with this going forward. And it's like, as I said, we don't want somebody going, sorry, rescuing is a bad thing, on your own, bye. We don't want that to be the case. It is important that we are able to step in emergencies, and to recognize that in an emergency without much thought, we're probably not going to do things perfectly. But if we get into this way of thinking and operating and acting generally in our day-to-day lives, we're far more likely to get a response in an emergency that's closer to that than the way that we've been conditioned most of our lives to be in the drama triangle.
Agreed.
Anything else you want to add? We've done quite a robust episode on this, but this is brand new. We knew this was gonna take some time to do because.
Well, and this is the shortened version. We did an hour of talking about it beforehand too. So
very much so. But we would love to hear your feedback on this, because this is something as brand new content. Nobody's ever heard this before. Let us know what your thoughts are. Let us know what your questions are. Let us know, I think there might be some nuance over here. Can you explain this to me? We will gladly dive deeper into that. Diving deep into these concepts, as you can tell by now, not an issue for us. But we don't want to go too deep with things and people be like, whoa, they've gone off the track. And for us to lose you on the way. So let us know what the things are that you want to know more about, and we'll dive deeper into that one. Next time, as I said earlier, we're going to get into some episodes. We're going to do an episode on how these things show up in situations that you can see in movies, where you can see these situations and be like, okay, because as Serena said, you'll see these things everywhere. And this is the thing. You want to be looking for them everywhere. Like when you first start learning about this and be like, I think that's harm dynamic. I think that's persecutor. I think that's victim approach. I think that's objective victim. So you can start to create an understanding about what the differences are. And so we've come up with some examples that we think would be helpful to kind of help you start to understand what these concepts are and put like a real face on them. But I mean, obviously, a fictional face on them, but sometimes that can actually make it easier to yes, exactly, where these are situations we maybe don't, we've tended to look, for the most part, it's a couple of exceptions in there, but for the most part these are very, very well-known movies, and therefore it will enable us to you probably going to know some of these situations and be like, oh that was that. Like even Serena, like we talked this morning and Serena's like, oh, you're right, like certain things that she hadn't spotted before because we haven't looked at it in this context. But I've been doing my
I'm
my
super
movie
excited
research.
about the last super excited about the last example because I was like,
yes,
oh, fuck, you're right. And it's so, when you hear it, you're like, excuse me,
I did not
but
expect it, and then when I was seeing it I'm like, well, this was a revelation. We will get into all of that next time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with that same episode about those shapes in the movies. But for now, between now and then, remember to stay safe, take care of yourself, and continue to meet your own needs. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and give us a written review,
as it will help more people find us.
And remember, when you're dealing with any situation, it is so important to consider and address the harm dynamic first before you consider any of the other shapes.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.